When our parents abandoned my younger brother and me, I made him an irresistible proposition, which resulted in some of the most thrilling days of our lives. My name is Sophie, and I never expected to find myself in such a situation. Growing up, my younger brother Nathan and I were inseparable. He was 5 years younger than me and was always the one I cared about after protecting me from bullies and helping me with my schoolwork. However, as time went, life started to pull us in several ways. I attended college and finally started working while Nathan was still in high school, trying to find out who he wanted to be. Our parents were always busy with hard jobs that left little time for family. They weren't neglectful, but they were often gone, and as soon as I was old enough to drive and do household responsibilities, I took over most of Nathan's care. It never seemed like an obligation. However, he was a pleasure to be around, constantly happy and eager to please. Caring for him was not a hassle. It was just a part of who we were. But everything changed when I moved out. By the time I was 23, I had moved into a tiny apartment across town, hadn't spent as much time at home as I should have, and felt guilty every time I thought about how much I was missing in Nathan's life. The carefree young brother I used to know was gradually becoming someone I didn't recognize, and the realization stung more than I wanted to acknowledge. Our parents said over the weekend that they would be gone for 3 days on business, leaving Nathan alone. My mother called out in a concerned tone. "Can you stay with him?" she asked. "He is mature enough to handle things, but knowing you are there would make me feel better." I agreed mostly out of regret. It wasn't like I had anything major planned, and spending time with Nathan would help bridge the gap between us. When I arrived, Nathan met me at the door with his trademark crooked grin. "Stranger, it's been a long time since our previous meeting." He laughed and drew me into a brief embrace. Sure, I said, rolling my eyes and smiled. "Have you missed me?" He smiled and stepped aside to allow me in. The home looked precisely the Nathane, neat, yet lived in, with a faint whiff of lemon-scented cleaner. Walking inside seemed weirdly surreal, like returning to my teenage years. That first night, we spent hours catching up. Nathan spoke about school, his friends, and his college plans, while I shared information about my own. It felt nice, like old times, to narrow the distance that had grown between us over time. For a time, nothing seemed to have changed, but as the night proceeded, I started to notice things about Nathan that I had previously neglected. He was no longer a young child. He had grown taller, his shoulders wider, and his voice deeper. He emanated a calm assurance and maturity that I had never seen before, and this threw me off. I tried to make the connection between the boy I once safeguarded and the young man sat across from me. After dinner, Nathan suggested we watch a movie. As he scrolled through the television selections, he made a positive comment. "This is not one of those dreary dramas you like." "Sorry," I mocked while seeming to be outraged. "My movie choices are perfect." He smiled and eventually picked a comedy that we had watched many times before. As the opening titles played, he fell onto the sofa next to me and extended his long legs. For a time, it was easy to forget about everything else and live in the present. We laughed at old jokes, repeated lines from memory, and relaxed into a comfortable tempo. But every now and again, I caught Nathan glancing at me, not in a strange or terrifying way, but with an intensity that made my stomach flutter. I disregarded it, telling myself I was just overthinking things. After all, he's my brother. The way he stared at me was not unusual. Was it there? When the film finished, Nathan stretched and yawned. "I am going to have a drink," he commented, rising up and headed into the kitchen. I remained on the sofa, aimlessly scrolling through my phone. A few minutes later, his voice boomed forth. "Hello, Sophie. Do you want anything?" "Sure," I replied. "Surprise me?" When he returned, he was carrying 2 cups of cola. He sat down again, slightly closer, and gave me one. His knee brushed against mine, sending a strange feeling through me that I couldn't describe. "Thank you," I said, striving to keep my voice level. He shrugged and sipped. "Not a problem." We sat quietly for a time, with just the low buzz of the television filling the room. I attempted to concentrate on my phone, but his presence was oddly distracting. I could feel the warmth emanating from him and the odd brush of his knee on mine. It was nothing. I assured myself it was merely proximity, but a little restless part of me wasn't convinced. So Nathan suddenly interrupted the stillness. "What's it like to live in the big city? Do you ever miss it here?" His inquiry seemed nonchalant, but the way his eyes met mine made me stop. "Yes," I occasionally confessed while putting down my phone. "However, the circumstances have altered. I prefer having my own place. You know," he nodded and lay back against the sofa. "I get it. Still, it seems weird not to have you around. The place seems quieter without you." I offered a little grin. "I miss being here sometimes," I remarked, "but things change. People grow up." "Yes," he murmured, his voice softer and more mournful. "I assume they do." Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. As the night went on, we continued talking, laughing at old memories and teasing one another about petty matters. The weird tension I had felt before gradually disappeared, giving way to a soothing warmth that reminded me how much I missed this. I miss him. By the end of the weekend, as I drove home, I had an epiphany. Some relationships are too powerful to break. Regardless of how far apart we are in life, Nathan wasn't just my younger brother. He was my anchor, the one constant in my life. As I drove back to my apartment, I vowed myself I would not wait so long to see him again. I threw a quick look at him, noticing how focused he seemed. His brow was slightly furrowed, and he had a serious face that I had never seen before. It made him look older and more mature, which concerned me. For a short time, I recognized him as more than simply my younger brother, but as a unique individual with his own set of struggles and complexities. That understanding threw me off, so I moved slightly to break the stillness. "Well," I said in a casual tone, "you'll be out of here soon enough. College, new friends, and a whole different lifestyle." Perhaps he stated it with a shrug, but that's not the Nathan. You've always been someone I could talk to. Even when circumstances were difficult, I continued to wrinkle my brow. "What do you mean?" He took a moment to look at the floor before returning his gaze to me. "Just after Dad began working full-time and Mom became so busy, I felt primarily alone. But you were always there. You made things simple." His words struck me hard, and humiliation rushed over me in waves. I had no clue how much my absence had affected him, how much he depended on me without ever saying so. "So I apologized to Nathan," I murmured. "I hadn't realized you felt that way." He shrugged again, but a slight smirk formed in the corner of his lips. "This is not your fault. You were dealing with your own troubles, but I'm glad you're here now," I said, reaching over to touch his shoulder. "And you know I'm always available if you need me. Right, or yes," he said, his grin expanding. "I understand." For a little moment, everything seemed to be back to normal, natural and simple, but as my hand touched his shoulder, I became immediately aware of the tension in the air. When our eyes met, something in his face softened, prompting me to reflexively withdraw my hand. My cheeks warmed up, and I quickly turned aside. "Anyway, I talked about clearing my throat. We should probably sleep since it is becoming late." "Yes," he agreed, stretching while standing. "A excellent concept." He walked toward the stairs, stopping at the bottom to glance back at me. "Good night." "Sophie, good night," I said. As he walked upstairs, I tried a smile and softly exhaled, only to find I was holding my breath. My thoughts were muddled, and I couldn't escape the feeling that something had changed between us. But I couldn't figure out what it was. I switched off the TV and walked to the kitchen to rinse my glass. The home was eerily quiet, with just the soft hum of the refrigerator disturbing the serenity. I remained at the window for a while, admiring the shadows of trees swaying in the moonlight. My mind raced with concepts that I couldn't put together. When I finally got into bed, I battled to sleep. I sat awake for what seemed like hours, looking at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the strange uneasiness that had come upon everything. Nathan's comments and his lingering gaze as he addressed me. Everything felt crucial, but I couldn't explain why. The following morning, I awakened to a faint sound of music coming from the kitchen. Sitting up groggily, I looked at the clock and was surprised to see how late it was. The sun had already reached its maximum height. I immediately threw on some clothes and went downstairs. Following the sound of music, Nathan was in the kitchen, fixing breakfast while humming along to a radio song. He was dressed casually in a t-shirt and trousers, his hair untidy from sleeping. He reminded me of the little child I used to torment and care for, but he also didn't. He seemed older and more confident, which threw me off surprise. Morning. When I arrived, he looked up and welcomed me. I cooked eggs. Want some? Sure, I said, sitting down at the table. Thanks. He placed a plate in front of me and took the seat across from me. His easy grin made it difficult to concentrate on my thoughts. For a time, we ate in peace, the warm sunshine streaming through the windows, casting a golden glow over the room. This is excellent, Nathan said quickly, breaking the stillness. Having you here makes it seem like the old days. I agreed with a little grin. It does. But even as I said it, I couldn't escape the feeling that something was wrong. The formerly smooth connection we had experienced had been replaced with something I couldn't quite articulate. Something made my chest tighten and my thoughts rush. I knew I couldn't avoid it, no matter how hard I tried. The morning passed in a whirl of petty duties and routine, but the unspoken tension between us remained. Nathan seemed at ease, humming along to the radio as he cleaned up the kitchen, while I busied myself with anything I could find, anything to keep my mind from wandering. Every glance and word we exchanged seemed heavier than before, but I couldn't understand why. By lunchtime, I was irritated. Nathan suggested we watch another movie, but the thought of sitting immobile made me uneasy. Why don't we take a walk? I advised that fresh air might assist to cleanse my head. Nathan smiled. Sounds great. Let me fetch my shoes. We stepped outside and strolled through the quiet neighborhood, which was bordered by large trees and well-kept lawns. It was the kind of environment in which nothing appeared to change. No matter how much time passed, we had a pleasant talk side by side about his school, my work, and the neighbor's too enthusiastic dog. It seemed normal again, like returning to a rhythm we hadn't experienced in years. Even as we laughed and spoke, I couldn't help but notice his shoulder brushing against mine and his gaze lingering when he thought I wasn't looking. I assured myself that it was just my thoughts going wild. But deep inside, I couldn't escape reality. As we neared the park at the end of the block, the sight of the swings and the dilapidated basketball court brought back childhood memories. Nathan sat on one of the swings, his long legs almost touching the ground, and motioned for me to join him. I paused momentarily before lowering myself onto the swing next him, the metal chains squeaking slightly as I leaned back. This town hasn't altered at all, he continued, his voice tinged with nostalgia. Yeah, I muttered, letting the memories wash over me. The moment seemed heavy, full of unsaid words and a tension I couldn't quite articulate. I smiled weakly and said, "It feels like we spent half of our childhood here." "That's because we did," he responded, laughing. "You persisted on pushing me on the swings despite my assurances that I could do it alone." I grinned back. "Since you were usually jumping off and landing in the mud." He grinned as he shook his head. "Mom made you pledge to keep me out of trouble." His laughter subsided, and his eyes went to the horizon. His expression became melancholy. "You were continually looking out for me." "Of course," I answered politely. "You're my little brother." For a minute, he said nothing. His demeanor was thoughtful, and his eyes narrowed slightly. Then, almost tentatively, he said, "Do you ever think about how different things would have been if Dad had been more present?" The question caught me off guard. I gazed at him, wondering how to respond. After a little pause, I said, "I guess, but you came out very nicely. You know, you don't need his approval to be proud of yourself." His eyes met me, and for a brief moment, the honest vulnerability in his eyes made my chest ache. "Thank you," he said quietly. "This means a lot." We didn't talk for a while after that, letting the stillness sink in. The distant sounds from the park filled the air, rustling leaves, birds chatting, and a faint squeak from the swings. It was peaceful, but I could still feel the weight of his prior statements hanging over us. Nathan slowly stood up, brushing his hands on his jeans. He responded, "We should go back. It's becoming colder. Yeah, I said, getting to my feet and falling in step with him. The walk home seemed longer than usual. The silence between us was no longer reassuring, but rather filled with notions that neither of us knew how to articulate. By the time we arrived at the home, I was ready to go to the guest room and clear my head. But Nathan had other intentions. "Let's play a game," he said, grabbing a controller with a wicked smile. "Tonight, the loser cleans the dishes." "You're on," I responded, pleased with the diversion. For the following hour, we became engrossed in the game, with spirited competition and bursts of laughing lifting our spirits. As usual, Nathan won the most of the rounds, but I was able to sneak a few wins, much to his dismay. By the end, the tension had dissipated, at least temporarily. "I am still not cleaning the dishes?" I remarked, crossing my arms in mock scorn as we switched off the console. He laughed. "Okay, I will let you off the hook this time." The remainder of the evening was ordinary. We ate supper, spoke about our plans for the following day, and then went through our usual sleep routine. However, as the residence got quieter and the night passed, the strange atmosphere from earlier reappeared, despite my best attempts to ignore it. I couldn't escape the sensation that something was happening between us. Later that night, while I lay in bed, looking at the ceiling, I heard a little creak from the flooring outside my room. My heart quickened, and I stopped to listen as a low footfall approached. Then a gentle knock. Sophie Nathan's voice seemed unsure. I sat up, my heart racing. "Okay, may I come inside?" I paused, staring at the time. It was late, and the house was silent, except for the low hum from the refrigerator downstairs. "What's wrong?" I need to speak to you," he murmured barely above a whisper. I took a quiet breath and slid my legs over the edge of the bed. "Okay. Come in." The door creaked open, and Nathan went inside, his expression inscrutable. Before closing it behind him, he leaned against it momentarily before crossing the room to sit on the side of the bed. "What's happening?" I questioned, maintaining a steady tone despite the uneasy knot in my gut. He did not respond immediately, keeping his eyes fixed on the floor and his shoulders tense. Finally, he said, "I've been thinking a lot recently about us, regarding how much you mean to me." His words made my heart beat, and I struggled to keep a neutral tone. "Nathan, you're my brother." I spoke carefully. "Of course, we mean a lot to one another. That is what family is." It's not only that he spoke barely above a whisper. "Nobody else has ever been as supportive of me as you have. You understand me, Nathan." I began, but he interrupted me. "I do not want to make things uncomfortable," he responded fast, "but I want you to know how much you mean to me. I don't know what I would do without you." His words lingered in the air, heavy with significance I didn't fully understand. As our silent tension reached its peak, I fixed my gaze on him. My thoughts were muddled. "Nathan," I ultimately muttered, my voice quiet yet firm, "I'm not sure you realize how tough this is for me to hear." His face wavered, and his brows wrinkled. "I'm not trying to make things difficult," he said simply. I needed to speak it, to get it out." I took a deep breath and ran my hand through my hair, attempting to relax my mind. "You mean a lot to me." "Too," I said hesitantly, "but we're siblings. Nathan. We've always looked out for one another, because that's what families do." His eyes glazed somewhat. "It's more than that," he said, his voice shaking. "You know, it is." I shook my head and felt my chest constrict. "You're simply confused," I replied. However, even as I spoke, the words seemed empty. "We've both gone through a lot, particularly with Mom and Dad being away so often. It is normal to feel connected because of this." He maintained that it was not confusion. His voice has calmed. "This is the way I feel, and I recognize that this is not normal, but I can't pretend it's not happening." I jumped up from my bed and started walking about the little room, trying to make sense of everything. My thoughts were muddled, caught between the urge to soothe him and the overpowering sensation that something had gone dreadfully wrong. I turned to face him and spoke forcefully. "Nathan, we can't keep having this discussion. It is unfair to all of us. His expression wavered. His face showed a momentary grimace of agony. He murmured, "I am not asking for anything. I simply wanted to let you know." His voice was honest and sincere, and it left me shocked. I took a cautious breath and sat back down, my shoulders sinking beneath the weight of the circumstances. "I don't know how to respond," I softly confessed. "You don't have to." He added a powerful voice. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. The room felt suffocating. The air was thick and hard to breathe. We were nearly at our breaking point. I hoped I could fix everything. I wanted to travel back in time to when things were simpler, but I wasn't sure how. "We need to find a way to go on." I ultimately said, "You're my brother, Nathan. This will never change." He slowly nodded, but the doubt in his eyes remained. "I don't want to lose you." He revealed that you are the only one who really knows me. "You're not going to lose me." I consoled him, keeping my voice cool. "However, we must define limits. We cannot continue to worry about it." The stillness that followed was stifling, yet it seemed necessary. After a long period, Nathan got to his feet, moving cautiously and slowly. "I apologize," he muttered. "I never meant to make you uncomfortable." I realize I reacted softly, and my tone was pleasant. "I'm not angry with you, but for our own sakes. Nathan, we must exercise caution." He nodded one more before pausing at the threshold. He remained there for a second, as if unsure whether to remain or go. When he eventually walked out, the quiet click of the door shutting behind him provided a sense of comfort. However, the pressure in my chest continued. I sat there for what seemed like hours, looking at the empty space around me, unable to comprehend what had just occurred. I couldn't explain why, but I could tell something had shifted between us. Something was shifting, and I felt it. The next morning was unusually quiet. The whole home seemed different, as if the atmosphere had shifted overnight. Nathan declined to join me for breakfast, and I did not compel him. I told myself that he, like me, needed some space and that everything would return to normal in due time. However, as the hours passed, the silence between us became heavier and more impossible to ignore. By the afternoon, I'd made up my mind to initiate the conversation. I found him in his room, sitting on the side of his bed wearing headphones. When he spotted me knocking, he removed them and offered me a small, timid grin. I said hello as I went inside. "How are you holding up?" He shrugged and lowered his gaze to the floor. "I'm okay," he murmured. I sat next to him, allowing just enough room for us to feel comfortable. I confess that this seems strange right now, but I don't want it to remain that way. "We need to figure this out. I don't want it to be like this," he said quietly. "I'm simply unsure how to fix it." "We'll figure it out," I assured him with a little grin. "It will take time, but we will get there." He glanced at me with a soothing gaze. "Thank you," he said sincerely, "for not freaking out. I'm your sister." I said simply that I would always have your back. For the first time in days, the tension seemed to lessen, but only little. We continued conversing, eventually shifting to lighter topics. His courses, friends, and plans for the weekend. By the time I left his room, the weight on my chest had changed somewhat. But when the house became quiet again that night, I couldn't escape the sense that something wasn't quite right. Nathan's comments, his thoughts, and everything that had transpired over the past several days stayed in my mind, making me uneasy and worried. No matter how hard I tried to convince myself otherwise, I knew this wasn't over. That night, the house was silent, but my thoughts were not. I lay awake, looking at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. Nathan's statements were played repeatedly. His sincerity, vulnerability, and the severity of what he'd acknowledged. I kept telling myself that everything will return to normal, that this was merely a difficult phase that we will get through. But deep down, I was unsure. Then, around midnight, I heard light footsteps in the hall. My chest tightened as they approached, eventually coming to a standstill right outside my door. I sat up, caught my breath, and waited. Then came a soft, careful knock. Sophie Nathan's voice was scarcely heard, as it had been the previous night. I took a deep breath and pushed myself to be calm. "Yes," I said. "May I come inside?" My heart hammered. I paused, staring at the time. It was late, and the house was dark and silent. Yet something within me refused to turn him down. Okay, I responded gently. Come in. The door cracked open, and Nathan went inside. He seemed nervous. His hands went deep into his pockets. His shoulders hunched slightly. He stopped momentarily before locking the door behind him and sitting on the side of my bed. Sorry, he mumbled. I understand I should not be here. It's all right. I responded quickly, despite my racing heart. What's on your mind? He hesitated again, his gaze fixed on the floor. I've been thinking about what I said earlier, and I'm scared I messed up. You didn't, I said firmly, leaning forward. Nathan, I promised you we'd sort things out, but I know it'll take time. He continued, his voice quivering. But it's difficult. I'm caught in my own thoughts and don't know how to get out. I stretched out to gently grasp his shoulder. You are not alone, I assured him calmly. We will go through this together. He glanced up, his eyes meeting mine. His intense look generated a curious tightening in my chest. You've always been there for me. He responded, his voice full of passion. Even if no one else was, I don't know what I would do without you. I responded calmly. You don't have to think about it. I'm not going anywhere. We did not speak for a long time. The silence between us seemed thick, weighted with emotions none of us could convey. Nathan's look was raw and vulnerable, something I'd never seen before. It left me at a loss for words. I just want everything to be normal again, he added, his voice quivering slightly. I don't want to lose you. You won't, I said, my voice faltering now. But, Nathan, we need to establish limits. We can't let this take control. He nodded slowly, with a worried face. He said, I know I'm trying. I know you are, I said quietly, and that's what counts. The tension in the room shifted, not disappearing, but becoming less oppressive. Nathan did not move to go, as I had anticipated. Instead, he stayed immobile, his gaze fixated on mine, as if searching for something he couldn't quite find. The air between us seemed electrified, and the quiet amplified each breath. After a time, I spoke quietly but strongly. Nathan, we can't keep going in circles like this. It is harmful for both of us. I know, he answered quietly, but I'm not sure how to go beyond that. Let it go. His honesty took me off guard, and I found myself leaning in slightly, as if closing the physical barrier between us would somehow bridge the emotional divide. Perhaps I advised sensibly that you tackle it head-on. He frowned, a look of confusion on his face. What do you mean? I paused, my pulse racing, as I searched for the right words. I sometimes talked slowly. The only way ahead is to stop dodging it. To completely address it, his gaze remained on me. His brow furrowed as he pondered what I had spoken. What are you saying? He trailed off, hesitant. I'm suggesting that maybe holding things within isn't the best idea. You must allow yourself to experience it profoundly before you can completely proceed. His look conveyed a sense of understanding. Sophie, it's okay. I comforted him calmly, placing my hand over his. This is only a moment, nothing more. Initially, he stood stationary. His gaze was riveted on me, the seriousness of the situation bearing down on both of us. He leaned in, nervously, our lips touched with the lightest brush, unsure and full of feelings that neither of us could express. It ended as quickly as it started, leaving a thick quiet that seemed suffocating. Nathan stepped back, his expression a combination of disbelief and anxiety. Sorry, he stuttered, his voice shaky. I didn't mean it. Nathan, and I cut him off, keeping my voice cool. Don't apologize. He caught my gaze and searched for meaning in my face. A tiny grin came on my lips as I said, Damn, I have a pretty handsome brother. I surprised myself when I said that he hesitated for a second. He leaned in again, saying nothing else. This time, the kiss was deeper and more determined, as if we were both testing the limits we had just passed. We came to a standstill just before I moved my hand, pushing us across the boundary we had previously passed. His eyes widened, matching my amazement. But none of us moved away. We both let it happen without saying anything, and it well exceeded our expectations. We acted recklessly, and I had to confess it. But at that moment, everything seemed beautiful. It felt great. When everything calmed down, we both lay there, totally conscious of what had just occurred. Wow, Nathan sighed. Breaking the quiet, I really don't know what to think. It's all right, I said, quickly cutting him off. It's completed, so we can go on. He supported me. His eyes were filled with unsaid questions that he did not express. He stood slowly and deliberately, as if afraid of ruining our delicate understanding. Good night. Sophie, he said gently. Good night, I remarked, watching him leave the room. When the door clicked shut behind him, I took a frightened breath, my thoughts racing. The moment was quick, yet it changed everything. A line had been crossed, which may help us find clarity or complicate issues even more. I had no clue what the future held, but for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of optimism that we would make it through together. The next morning, something about the home seemed different and lighter. Nathan joined me for breakfast, looking more calm than he has in days. We casually discussed our intentions, with the conversation flowing effortlessly and naturally. It seemed like a step forward, and I hung on to that optimism as the hours passed, until it was time for me to go. Nathan walked me to the door. Josh hadn't come home yet, which was comforting. I had to tackle this on my own. Thank you for staying. Nathan smiled softly yet sincerely. It meant a lot. I am pleased I did. I said, I will return soon. Okay. We'll keep talking and figure this out. He nodded with a hopeful expression. Yes, we will. As I drove away, the home vanished from my rearview mirror, but the weight of all that had transpired stayed with me. I knew the next few days would be challenging, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were making progress, which was enough for now. Back in my flat, life resumed its usual pace. However, no matter how hard I tried to forget about that night, the memories remained. I found myself thinking about Nathan more than I wanted to admit, wondering how he was doing and if he had found the clarity he needed. A few weeks later, my phone vibrated with a message from him. Hello? I just wanted to thank you again. Things seemed clearer now, and I'm doing all right. I looked at the message for a long time before responding. I'm happy. Just take one step at a time. Okay. I'm always there if you need me. He answered quickly. I know I will be okay. It wasn't quite a conclusion, but it was progress, and that was enough for now. Still, I find myself questioning everything and wondering what other people think. Was it wrong? Was there anything I should regret? Should I feel guilty? I don't know. Please share your thoughts in the comments. It would mean a lot. Thank you.